Welcome to our another session across the world. And today we have come with a topic which is a very sensitive topic in Pakistan and as well as in the United States, and that is domestic violence against the women.
And I realize for anyone watching this, we're talking about a topic that greatly affects women throughout the world. And here we have two men talking about it. So probably it would be ideal if we had a woman on this panel. I apologize that we don't. But I'm sure I will do my best to try to represent what I think may be the viewpoints of at least some women. So my question to you, Hamad, is how big a problem is domestic violence against women in your country? And I'll be happy to answer the same about my country, but you go first.
The domestic violence in Pakistan, according to the 2017-18 Pakistan Demographic and Health Survey, the 28% of women aged 15 to 49 had experienced partner violence in their lifetimes.
What percentage?
About 28% of the women
28%.
which
Yeah.
are aged 15 to 49. This was a slight decrease from 32% of the women which reported to have experienced physical violence back in 2012 and 13. But after during the pandemic and now the ratio of violence increased by 45%.
Wow. Well, I don't have numbers at my fingertips for the United States, but I would not be surprised if there was a lot of parallel. I will tell you as a personal story, I grew up in a house where my father, who's both my parents have passed away, but my father, when I was young, had a very bad temper, and he did engage in domestic violence against my mother, mostly in the form of screaming and yelling, but there were occasional slaps. And one of the lessons that I learned at a young age is I will never, ever, ever, ever raise a finger or my voice against whoever I might marry. But it is a problem in the United States. And it's not just a problem among the poor or among any particular ethnic group or minority group or whatever. But yes, this is a problem. In the United States, there has always been woven into our fabric this sort of machismo, strong man. I don't need help from anybody else. And one of the unfortunate sort of side effects of that kind of mentality is this: men are in charge, and men make the decisions. And at some point, if a woman crosses him, well, that's where. And of course, we also have problems with alcohol and things like that. And oftentimes, to women who are victims of domestic violence, it's not unusual that the male partner has been engaged, is drunk or had several drinks, and so their behavior has been affected by that. That doesn't excuse it at all. Please be clear, that does not excuse it. But I would say, again, I don't know this for a fact, but it would not surprise me if at least a third of women, and maybe as much as 50% of women, have had some kind of victimization in the area of domestic violence. Certainly, if you talk about sexual harassment, maybe a broader umbrella than the actual abuse, that figure is probably more like 80% or higher. Most women I know at some point in their lives have been the victim of at least sexual harassment, if not sexual assault or something worse.
Yes, is this problem primarily a concern among low-income or low-educated homes, or does it affect all demographic groups in the United States?
While I would say it's probably true that people who are economically challenged, as in people who are struggling with poverty or near poverty, homes where people may be unemployed, and so therefore they're under great financial stress, there probably is a higher risk of domestic violence because of the situation. It kind of lends itself to that. But this is by no means a problem that's isolated or limited to people of lower economic means. There are people of all economic levels, all education levels, all levels of intelligence, all age levels. I would say that it does seem like this challenge is concentrated more on people in their 20s, 30s, 40s, and 50s, not so much on the older population. But it's also possible that in the older population, it's just not reported. It's just not discussed as much. Younger generations, I think women have become more empowered to come forward and shine the spotlight on domestic abuse. I think women, perhaps of an older generation, people who were born, in the 1940s, 1930s, 1950s, perhaps to some extent, those women are a little more reticent to come forward. For a long time, women didn't have nearly as much power as men in our society. That's still true. And as a result, they were afraid to mention that they were victims of domestic violence for fear that the husband might retaliate or that the husband might kick her out of the house and she would be helpless, because there was a time when most women worked inside the home and very few women had a job. So they were financially dependent on their husband and would put up with an awful lot of abuse just because the option of leaving them was too terrifying.
So, here in Pakistan, the vast majority of these women belong to the educated urban middle and upper classes. But recently, in 2021, there was a very famous case in which a woman, Noor Muqaddam, which belongs to a elite community of capital city of Pakistan, Islamabad. She was brutally murdered by a man in a house, and that case was highlighted on the social media and the mainstream media, and which demonstrates that this problem is in every society of Pakistan, we can say. In the Pakistan, there are some tribal areas in Pakistan. There is almost 0% ratio of educated women, because they have no parents to send their women to for their schools. So in the uneducated societies of Pakistan, it is a very common problem here in Pakistan.
Oh, yeah. Why do you think this? This is a question for you, but I'll answer it too. Why do you think domestic violence continues to be a problem, and as you indicated, seems to be on the rise in some cases in Pakistan? Why do you think that is?
Yes, the factors associated with the domestic violence in Pakistan are mainly, I think, a low economical status of women, lack of awareness about women rights, because I told you that a lot of societies do not send their girls to the school. So women are very, there is a lack of awareness among women about about their rights, and falsified beliefs here, some religious belief. One thing I want to make it clear that the Islam is a main religion here in Pakistan, and according to the Islamic laws and Islamic teachings, the men and women have equal rights, and also imbalance the empowerment issues between males and females is also a problem, and patriarchy, a male-dominant social structure, and one more factor, there is a lack of support from the government.
In the United States, I don't know that domestic violence is on the increase, but what I do think is that reporting of it is on the increase. I think in the last 40 years, while women still are discriminated against, there's no question about that. This is still a man's world in the United States, unfortunately. But women have made tremendous strides in progress, in educational attainment, in the narrowing the income gap in terms of pay levels for men and women, though that gap still exists. And I think women are more likely to come forward and point out when they've been victims of domestic violence. There's a movement that started, well, I can't say started a few years ago, but really took off a few years ago. It's called the Metoo Movement, which is a reference to, I, as a woman, me too, I am also a victim of domestic violence. And it became a charge for women to be more assertive and be more outspoken about cases of domestic abuse and domestic violence, whether they're in a marriage relationship or single. It could be an employment situation. I mean, it's not just about domestic violence. It's also about violence in the workplace. I mean, male superiors who are sexually assaulting women or requiring sexual favors in order for the woman to get a promotion. So this is not just limited to the home, but women are becoming more outspoken. And therefore, I think it may seem like there are more cases when really what I think it is there's more awareness that this has been going on for a long time, and now women are stepping out from behind the closed doors to make a point that this can't be tolerated, and it is having some definite positive impact. I really do believe that it's become. I think the nation has become much more sensitized to just how rampant this problem is.
Is there a problem with violence against women on college and university campuses? What is that about?
Yes, it is true, and a lot of this, not all of it by any means, but a lot of this is associated with drinking and fraternity parties where men and women get together, and there's a lot of drinking, and women may be ending up in a bad situation where a male who's inebriated takes advantage or thinks that they have the liberty to do whatever they want. And I'm not pointing the blame at women at all. Please be clear. I'm not suggesting this is the woman's fault at all. But because of I think there's a multitude of factors, but in the college environment, where now these young people are out from underneath their parents' supervision for the first time, and they kind of let themselves go crazy. That's where a lot of these people start experimenting sexually and all sorts of things. And you add alcohol into the mix and parties into the mix, and a lot of times, young men absolutely take advantage of the situation. And I believe I heard some statistic like 20% of women on American campuses claim that they have been a victim of either rape or sexual assault. So again, I don't know that this problem is greater now than it used to be, but it's clearly, the spotlight is now being shined on it as women are finally coming forward and saying, yes, I too am a victim.
Here also in Pakistan, there have been marked trend of female students speaking out against harassment at public and private universities across the country. Last year, a student named Perveen, a nurse training, which was a nurse, she was training at People's University of Medical and Health Sciences in Nawabshah, moved the court against university officials for sexual harassment and attempted murder of the girls. And in August 2020, a young PhD student of molecular medicine at Karachi University, which was named Nadia, reportedly committed suicide because she was allegedly being harassed by her supervisor. And I'm giving those examples to elaborate that, yes, in the universities and schools of Pakistan, recently in the past few years, this problem is now highlighted on the social media and the mainstream media. And yes, this situation is very much alarming. If the students in the main universities and colleges are on the target of the domestic violence.
Yeah. I will also say another area that is a major source of problem of violence against women is in the military in the U.S. And I would imagine this might be universal. The military in the United States is still a very male-dominated institution and culture. The vast majority of people in power and authority and the people higher up in the hierarchy are, 90% of them or more are men. And so there is a term that we sometimes talk about, the good old boys culture, which is all these guys who have power and they can kind of do what they want and nobody's going to say anything about it, so they can get away with whatever. This has been a long history in the U.S. military of violence against women. Again, the spotlight is starting to be shown on it, but the fear of a lot of women, understandably, is if they report it, it's all going to be turned around on them, and that somehow they're the ones to blame, not the man. They're the ones that are lying, not the man. So there's an understandable fear among a lot of women who especially have aspirations to either rise up in the ranks of the military or rise up in the ranks of corporate America. There's a lot of fear about coming forward, for fear that there will be retaliation against them. And there's history to prove that. So this is not just an imagined fear.
The United States is considered as an example for the rights for their residents and citizens. Do you think domestic violence in the United States is among the top problems? And if it is, at what level it exists now? Because the recent case of famous film stars Amber Heard and Johnny Depp were recently in the court, and whatever was the result of that case, it can be assumed that it is a major problem in the American society.
Well, that the case you're talking about, the actor Johnny Depp and the actor Amber Heard, I think one of the reasons it got so much attention is it was just so shocking. The allegations were so shocking, and the things that came out in the court demonstrate that these are two highly imperfect people who were probably both guilty of some really bad behavior for quite some time. As to where does this rank in all the other levels of problems like climate change and other types of crime and healthcare and the economy, this is probably not a topic that is going to be a topic that any candidate for office picks as one of their top issues, but it is a real issue. It does affect people at so many levels, so many different generations. I would imagine if you did a survey of men and a survey of women and asked how big a problem is this, the women's response would show this as being a much higher problem than the men's responses. I imagine that men would be more unaware of this issue, and women would be extremely aware and probably have personally experienced some aspect of this in their lifetime. So I think one of the good things is more and more attention has been shined on this issue in recent years, which is probably going to cause at least some men to think twice before, especially men in power, to think twice before they take advantage of women, lest it ruin their reputation, ruin their career, or end up in criminal charges. But we're not. We have a long way still to go as a society. Women probably have more rights in the United States than many countries of the world. In that regard, it's a good thing. But if anybody were to say that everything's fine and men and women are treated fully equally in our society, and that sexual violence against women is really on the wane, that just is not true. It's still a problem, and it will probably be a problem 20 years from now. But the more that we talk about it, the more that we, point out examples of where this is going on, the more likely that this problem will be curtailed to some extent in the years to come.
We hope that the future of women in both countries, is bright, and in the coming years, especially the men and the governments have to work to make an example that this world is an equal place for the woman to live. And I hope that in the coming years, our governments and the society will groom itself to get out of this domestic violence.
Thank you. I hope so too.
Thank you.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much. See you all again on another episode of Across the World. Thank you, Hamad. Take care.